Welcome, everyone. My name is Dr. Joan Brame. I'm in the Department of Sociology and Anthropology. I'm actually the department chair. And I am thrilled to have three faculty members here with us today to talk a little bit about how we are actually adapting, responding, and showing our resilience to the face of the pandemic and all the other things that are going on in our world right now, to kind of give you a glimpse of what's happening and how we're staying engaged with our students. So we have Dr. Abigail Stone, Dr. Frank Beck, and Dr. Chris Wellin. So I'm just going to start with a simple question that the three of you guys can answer, and it's tell me a little bit about how you've adapted your courses to engage students with the current social issues despite the fact that we're mostly remote.
Well, I was supposed to teach a lab course this fall, Zooarchaeology, which is the archaeology of animal bones, where we analyze small pieces of bones from archaeological sites, and that does not work well on Zoom. So in conversations with colleagues over the summer, I decided to create a new seminar called Plagues, Pandemics, and People that's all about using diseases in the past to understand the current moment. And so right now we're working through a kind of interdisciplinary study of the bubonic plague on one hand and malaria on the other to discover, two different types of diseases and how they've impacted humans throughout history. So we're looking at history, we're looking at archaeology, we're looking at genetics, we're looking at art history as well. This week we were studying the impact of art or disease on art, and so we had a guest lecture about death and the preponderance of death in late medieval, early Renaissance art and how that relates to the plague. And then we studied World War II propaganda related to malaria prevention in Thursday's class. And so the students after that really were thinking about what kind of propaganda or what kind of public health messaging the US government might come up with for COVID-19 in a more of a mid-century mindset. So they created some ad campaigns about mental health during the pandemic and about mask use during the pandemic as kind of a corollary to these malaria ads that we were seeing from World War II.
That's awesome. That's a class I want to take.
It's pretty fun. We're all going to end up hypochondriacs at the end of it because we're talking about all these diseases that are scary and terrible, but it does provide an interesting context for the moment that we're in.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Turn it over to Abby's got to run to another meeting. That's kind of the life we're in, one Zoom meeting to the next. But I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Frank Beck.
Thanks, Joan. Take care, Abby. So I'm teaching a seminar a research experience class to graduating seniors. And the idea is for them to get their hands dirty with an actual research project. I do it as a group, but the biggest thing that we're dealing with this semester is inspired by institutional racism, structural racism, whatever you want to call it. We read sociology debates about that, sociologists debating each other about that topic, and then how we're doing it and how it's been adapted is they're working with secondary data. And so they're able to do this at home or here on campus. And they are measuring segregation in Illinois cities, cities that they're from. And then they are also measuring using statistics to study traffic stops in those same Illinois cities. And so what are the patterns within traffic stops, and what are the patterns of residential segregation? And they read a little bit about history of segregation and where that comes from. And then the real sociology of it is to hopefully, is to see if there's any relationship between a city that's highly segregated. Is it also disproportionate in its traffic stops? And a city that's lower on segregation, like Bloomington Normal, is it lower on its traffic stops? And the data is not neat and clean in that way. And so the sociology of it is to see what's going on in a macro way on segregation, and then what's going on in a macro way with traffic stops, and see if there's any connection between the two. So that's how we've, that's the content of the class.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing, Frank. And finally, Dr. Chris Wellin.
Well, thank you very much. I teach a 200-level course, an introduction to social gerontology. This is the study of social influences on the aging process, and it's not doesn't focus narrowly on one life stage. It focuses on aging as a process from birth to death, and many transitions along the way. We study adolescence, we study retirement, but it is true with an aging society, and now very soon, in a matter of few years, we'll have about 20% of the United States which will be defined as old if we use 65 plus as an index. So in really one long human lifespan, about 100 years, we've quadrupled the proportion of our society that reaches advanced age, averaging over 80 years, a few years more for women than men. And so we cover basic social epidemiology. These are principles of public health and population health that are really valuable for students in nursing, social work, public health, pre-med students. So what we find is, very briefly, that we're, in a sense, a victim of our own success. People reach very advanced ages, they're more likely to develop chronic conditions such as diabetes, hypertension, COPD, and we find with the COVID-19 virus that these conditions seriously exacerbate the impact of the virus. And so it points to our need, which we always declare in the course, to move toward a more proactive, preventative model of health rather than a reactive model relying on hospitals, more about health education and preventing these conditions from taking root in the first place. Two other brief things that we want to mention there is, there are many occupations that students are going into that will be important in achieving that kind of greater education and training for healthier, longer lives. The final thing I'd say is, unfortunately, within nursing homes, which has been a hot spot in terms of morbidity and mortality, fancy terms for illness and death, and there's good data now that says that one of the main mechanisms that's led to nursing homes being such dangerous places is not only that the older residents are themselves in frail health, but the direct care workforce, we're talking about certified nursing assistants, dietary aides, others, our inadequate compensation and benefits for these workers mean that it's very, very typical for them to work multiple jobs, multiple settings. And so it turns out that this is one of the main reasons why mortality rates have been so very high in nursing homes. And so one aspect of my own research, and that also comes into our teaching, is the need to honor direct care providers, which in our aging society, with fewer adult children to provide care, are just going to be more essential as we look toward the future. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. These are just a few examples from just a sampling of our faculty about how we're keeping our students engaged with very real world, tangible issues. They're going to provide our students with transferable skills. They're going to prepare them for a really diverse and globalized workforce going forward. So even in the face of the pandemic, we are actually using this current situation as basically an experiential learning opportunity and showing our students how the skills that they learn as sociologists and anthropologists have real meaning and real application across a diverse array of contexts.
And now we hear from Dr. Livia Stone, the coordinator of our graduate program in anthropology.
I'm Dr. Liv Stone. I'm an associate professor of anthropology and the coordinator of our anthropology graduate programs. The core of our anthropology graduate programs is really one-on-one attention with a faculty advisor whose research is in the area of specialization and the concentration of the graduate student. And that continues to be the case in this era of pandemic. Graduate students are meeting with their advisors frequently and staying in communication with me about what they need to do to get done. I've also set up some internal social media software so that they can talk to each other and feel supported as a cohort of graduate students. and also so that we can have better communication with their advisors and with the professors in the program. Even in the best of times, being a graduate student can feel like an isolating experience. So I really know how important it is to build that sense of community and that sense of support among graduate students and the faculty and among themselves.